All right. So we just seen Jesus walking on the water to the disciples who were in the boat. So let me go ahead and jump into reading. I'm going to read from 53 to 56, and then we're gonna start looking at it. It says this: And when they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. And when they got out of the boat, the people immediately recognized him and ran about the whole region and began to bring the sick people on their beds to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he came, in villages, cities, countrysides, they laid their sick in the marketplaces and implored him that they might touch even the fringe of his garment. And as many as touched it were made well. All right. So if we back up to Mark chapter 4, we'd find Jesus telling the disciples, let's get in the boat and go to the other side. And they got in the boat. Jesus took a cat nap. There was a big storm that came up. And Jesus was sleeping. They went wake him up. They said, hey, man, don't you care if we die? And he said, hey, calm down. He spoke to the storm. It calmed down. Then they got to shore. And where were they? Anybody remember? They were in Gennesaret. That's correct. All right. So then the demon-possessed man, he came with a legion of demons in him. And he ran to Jesus. Jesus cast him out, and all the people from the countryside, all the town folk, they came out and they asked Jesus to leave. And Jesus did that. Now, they asked Jesus to leave because there was a great darkness in that land. There was a legion of demons that had been doing work in that area, and there was a darkness. So when Jesus showed up and he was doing all these things like this, right, casting out demons, there was a lot more going on. I mean, the demons went in a big old herd of pigs, 2,000 pigs. That's a lot of food. That's a big economic upturning. But nonetheless, the people, they said, look, if you don't mind leaving, that'd be great. And so Jesus does that. He doesn't fight with them. He doesn't argue with them. There's no kind of contention there. The guy that was recently relieved of this legion, he wanted to get in the boat and go with Jesus. But Jesus said, nope, you stay here. You're not coming with me. So this guy stays there, and Jesus says, I want you to go into the Decapolis, into all the cities and towns in this region, and I just want you to testify as to what was done. Now, had this guy previously been a disciple of Jesus? No. We don't have any record of that. Has this guy undergone any formal evangelism training? We don't have any record of that. I don't think that was a thing. But, nope. Do you think he's qualified? Maybe some of you do, maybe some of you don't. All right. But he was just asked to do something that Jesus didn't ask the disciples to do. Stay in a region and convert the region. He was untrained, unlearned in all the ways of Jesus. All he had, the only thing he had was an encounter with Jesus that left him radically different. That's what he had. All right. Jesus and the disciples, they get in the boat. They go back across. They do some things. I can't tell you exactly what the time period is, but now they're coming back. First time they came, they went through a storm. Second time they came, they went through a storm. Starting to think there's a lot of storms on the Sea of Galilee. Maybe you picking up a pattern. Anyways, so they get there to Gennesaret now. They had put in for Bethsaida. It's about 10 miles away from Gennesaret. That's okay. They had a storm. They were blown off course. It happens. It's no problem. Not a problem. They land. They moor to the shore. They get out the boat. They get out the boat, and all the people start to see and they recognize Jesus. Now the disciples are with Jesus. Their last interaction with the people of Gennesaret was a request for departure. Okay? I'm not saying anybody was mean, anybody was rude. I don't know what was going on, but that's how it was. So the people start looking, they shuffling around, scuttling around, and I don't know exactly what the disciples might be thinking, but it's possible that they're thinking, oh, they're about to ask us to get on down the road again to kick rocks. I don't know. But anyways, what they're doing is they recognize Jesus, and now they're going to gather people up so that they could bring them to Jesus. If we compare the last trip to Gennesaret to this trip to Gennesaret, in this short period of time, would you say that it's a radically different reception? Radically different reception. I would say. And why? Like we're not reading about it, it's not written. What brought the change? The unqualified man who was left behind brought the change. The untrained, hadn't been a disciple, hadn't sat with Jesus for some one-on-one coaching, hadn't done any of that. Nope. The only difference from the last time they were there to this time they were there is this man who was radically changed, stayed behind, and he went out. And what do you think he was preaching? Well, it's easy. First off, his appearance was greatly different. Before Jesus met this guy, he was wild, savage looking. Barely had any clothes on, was always tearing himself up. And then whenever the townsfolk came out the first time, they got there and they seen him clothed and in his right mind. That's what it said. So he is radically different. So simply him showing up is a big deal. But when he shows up and people are like, what happened to that guy? And he says something like, Jesus of Nazareth happened to this guy. Right? I was minding my business. I was out in the tombs. I was doing my thing. Jesus showed up and I came for him and I got there and I didn't even have to say anything and he took care of it. He cast out that legion. Boom. Gone. Done. And here I am. You see, he's been all over that region just showing himself and saying the most simple things. You know what's crazy in Christianity? People think that if you're not some kind of Bible scholar, you're not qualified to go out and speak. You're not qualified to have a conversation. That's a silly and a wild thing for people to think, but it's a thing that people think. In my normal life, when I was growing up, I vividly remember being a teenager. For all of you who are around that teenager area, look, I'm so sorry for you guys. I know what you're going through. This is the worst point in life. But I remember being a teenager, and I remember sitting out and not doing a lot of things. Now, some people were blessed, and I remember looking out at people and thinking, they don't care how stupid they look. And that's a problem for me, because I didn't want to look stupid. When I was a teenager, I didn't want to look stupid. And so if I hadn't practiced and mastered it off by myself somewhere, I wasn't going to do it in front of you. That's crazy, because then I was going to know that you know that I don't know how to do everything perfectly. I know what you're thinking. That's a crazy thing to think, Brother Jeremy. It is a crazy thing to think, but it's a thing people think, right? We do the same thing as we get older and we become adults in our Christianity. We think, well, I ain't got no degree in theology. I'm not qualified to talk to people. This guy wasn't qualified to talk to people. So let me remind you of what he did. He went out and he showed the people a man who used to be one way and now is a different way. Did you just hear what I said? He went out and he showed the people that he used to be one way and now he's a different way. He looked different, sounded different, probably smelled different, I don't know. But there was a lot of differences in him. And when asked, why are you different? He simply said, Jesus. He didn't tell them the things he doesn't know about Jesus. And if they started asking him all kind of wild and crazy questions, I feel like I know what he answered them. Don't know. Can't help you there. What I can tell you is what I know about him. That's it. You can go off in the weeds and fight whatever fight you want to fight. I'm just telling you my experience whenever I met Jesus. This is what happened. This is why I was once this guy and now I'm this guy. That testimony right there is the craziest thing to me. Because when Jesus said, he went across, he addressed, and y'all remember whenever I preached the sermon in Mark when Jesus had cast out the legion, I said he got back in that boat and he went across because he had done everything that he came to do. He wasn't worried. He wasn't scared. He didn't think if me and the disciples aren't here, things aren't going to get done. He didn't think that because he left the man that he knew was good for the job. Isn't that a crazy thing? No one else would have thought this guy was qualified. If Jesus gets back in the boat and tells the disciples, look, man, I'm going to leave that dude here because he's going to radically change this whole region, they would have probably been like, yeah. You want me and James and John to go ahead and stay with him? Make sure he does it right? I don't know if they would have said that. I'm just talking like I would have thought. You know, if it had been like, Jeremy, I'm leaving this dude, I'd have been like, that dude ain't trained. That guy don't know what he's doing. You sent us out by twos, and we went and do all kinds of stuff. You didn't send that guy out. You know, he don't have the training. I don't know, we think like that. But anyways, he left that guy, and now they show back up in Gennesaret. They go and they collect up all the people. They don't even bring Jesus into a temple or church, anything like that. Where does it say they bringing people to meet him? In the marketplace, in the streets, wherever he's at, that's where they coming. It's so different from their first time with him. So different. Now they're thinking, man, if people just touch this guy, if they just, got you, thanks, man, right? That's where they're at now. Man, if we just touch this guy, what a wonderful change in a region. All that darkness, all that work. Now, I don't feel bad for hell, but some of you might sympathize with them and be like, oh, you know, all that hard work gone to waste. You know, I don't know, maybe you think like that. But all that work that legion of demons was doing in the region, flipped over by this wily, unqualified, untrained, non-disciple guy. Man, that's cool. So Jesus, naturally, he's healing them, taking care of everything they need, no problem. It was easier to rid all of that region of that darkness. So easy that Jesus didn't even have to address it himself directly. Wasn't even a direct assault. Just left that guy. But now that region's all cleared up. Now it's different. Now there's a different reception to Jesus. And now we move a little further in Scripture and we see assault number 2. Check it out. Now when the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they came from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? Burn. Man, they got him. All right, so all of this big looming darkness cleared away by an untrained, unqualified guy. But lo and behold, it's not the end of the worries. It's not the end of the trouble. Here come the scribe and the Pharisees. Now, they're still in the same region. These guys that came from Jerusalem, they were in this area. Now, they were in this area when the demons were operating in this area, and they didn't have a problem. I need you to understand that. But now here's Jesus, and Jesus is hanging out. He's in the marketplace. He's doing his thing. He's healing the people. The disciples are eating. And the Pharisees and the scribes, they say, I couldn't help but notice you filthy disciples out here eating with their hands not washed. They'd die in a mechanic shop. I can't believe they're eating without washing their hands. Why do you not keep to the tradition of the elders? They want to know. They demand to know. Wow. All right, so they ain't got a problem operating in this great darkness. No problem. But Jesus shows up, starts healing people. starts changing lives, and they got a problem with that. That's an interesting turn of events. When a legion of hell encountered Jesus, it might sound weird, but they did it with respect. If you recall, if you go back to every encounter Jesus had like that, they were respectful to Jesus. They honored him. They feared him because they knew who he was and they knew why he was. And that's a very important factor. When a legion of demons comes face to face with the Son of God and treats him with greater dignity, respect, and honor than the priests, the scribes, and the Pharisees do, we have a catastrophic breakdown. You can't see that? I'm sorry for you. But here they are. And what gives them the audacity? What gives them the pomp? What gives them the pride and the arrogance to stand before the Son of God and question why his disciples hasn't washed their hands? Well, that right there, my friends, that's the important portion of what we want to look at. That's what I really want to dig into. Because the same thing that gives them that entitlement to be proud, boastful, arrogant in the face of Christ is the same thing that gives us that. When there's any lack of humility in our approach to the Father, in our approach to Christ, then we have a problem. So what I want to do is I want to raise your awareness. So if you find yourself strutting around God like you belong there, then I need you to flag that immediately. I just need a flag to go off. Because that's the same kind of self-righteous nonsense that these guys had. So just let a flag, just pow. And then just ask, what am I doing? Because you might act like you belong in the presence of God, but I assure you that you do not. That's why our allowance before God is called grace, mercy, and compassion, not entitlement. You understand that? You see, if we're approaching God with anything less than humility, then we're approaching in the wrong way. If we approach God with a greater audacity than the legion of demons from hell does, then we need to know we have a problem. Something's wrong there. You see, but it was things like we just watched that gave these guys the ability or the delusion, at least to stand before Christ as if they were entitled to be there. No, if they had greater right to be in the presence of God than his own Son. It was things like this. It was keeping in the sacraments, keeping in the ordinances, keeping in the traditions. If I've been doing all of the right things that religion had told me to do, then I belong here. No, you don't. That's not the facts. The facts are we're there by allowance and permittance because of grace, mercy, and compassion. Because forgiveness of sins exists. That's why we're there. Take away the forgiveness of sins and are you in the presence of God? Let me ask you something. Take away the forgiveness of sins and are you in the presence of God? Can't be. Can't be. And is forgiveness of sins your work? Is forgiveness of sins something that you've done? Is it the work of the church? Is it the work of Christ? Therefore, it must be grace, mercy, forgiveness, right? Therefore, you're not entitled there. You don't have the right there until grace, mercy, and compassion. But these guys, though, they looked at what Jesus was doing and they said, we do more than what he does. Imagine that. That's where we at. We do more than he does. You don't keep to the traditions. You don't even make your guys keep to the traditions. You just do whatever you want. You walking around here just living it up. No discipline. No love for the law. Eating all crazy. Eating without washing their hands. That's what gave them the audacity to approach the Son of God like they did. So we need to ask ourselves and give an honest evaluation. Is there things in me that have me before God like I belong here? Because that's a delusion. That's a deception. That's the kind of dangerous pride. That's the kind of dangerous pride that we almost can't get past. It was easier for Jesus. It was easier for the darkness set by a legion of demons in a region to dissolve than it was the rules, regulations, and traditions of the priesthood in Nazareth. Remember, I told you whenever we first got there, I said Jesus is going to come back to Gennesaret and all this is going to change, greatly change. He left Gennesaret, he went to Capernaum, then he went to Nazareth. He got to Nazareth and it said he could not do a work there because the people, because the synagogue and the temple, they did not have an atmosphere conducive to Jesus doing work. If the people wanted to go out, it said because they all knew Jesus. They knew his family, right? So he can't be, he's the carpenter's son. That's Mary's boy. That dude's not better than us. He can't come in here and change the way we do church. He can't come in and change the way we operate. You see, and that was the attitude. That's what went out to the people. You can't change the things that we're doing just because of this. It was easier to dissolve all the darkness from that legion of demons than it was to dissolve the pride and the arrogance, that nonsense that came from that, so that Jesus could do a work. It said there were some people in that area that went out to Jesus in Nazareth. But there was a price to pay if you were going to openly defy the church. So we watched Peter with Jesus when he was walking on water. We watched that. I talked about the scenario of being in that boat like that. It's religion. And all of this whole stretch to me has one big pattern. We look at that boat as if it's religion that was designed to get us somewhere. It was designed to get us to Jesus. And when it gets us to Jesus, then we make this evaluation. We make this honest assessment. What do I want? Do I want to keep pulling the oar? Do I want to keep throwing the water? Do I want to keep doing the busy work? Right? I got nothing against religion. I didn't come to Calvary and try to dissolve the church. Say that any corporate worship, any corporate religion is a bad and an evil thing. No, I never said that. The reason I'm so hard on religion is because it was designed to get us to Jesus. And then once it gets us to Jesus, then it's designed for us to be freed in Jesus. Not to keep your hand to the oar, not to keep it to the bucket, not to keep it to the steering wheel, but to walk freely with Christ at that point. We could be busy inside this church and it doesn't mean Jesus is here. We could occupy this church 24 hours a day and it doesn't mean that Jesus is here. You understand? When Jesus is here, it means Jesus is here. Nothing else brings him here. So, when I'm looking at this entire passage, this big old chunk, because I need you to remember, Mark, he didn't have verses and chapters and headers. He just had a letter that he was writing. When we're looking at this one big thought, this is what we see. The evaluation in myself. Do I want to hold on to religion, the traditions, the sacraments, the ordinances, the things that this denomination or that denomination tell me I must do? Or do I want to be with Jesus? Just with Jesus. Do I want to just hear what he says, follow where he leads, Go where he goes. Do I want to do that? Or do I want to hold on to the labor? Because the Pharisees and the religious leaders right here, the scribes and the Pharisees, they have a problem with Jesus not doing the work that they are doing. That's what we see. So it gives them that pride, that arrogance, that audacity to be who they were, to so disrespectful before the Father and the Son. That's what we watch. So we have to evaluate that. We have to determine that in ourselves. What is it that we want? What is it that we do? What is it that we strive for? For some reason, at times, we tend to believe that we've become the correcting rod of Christ. But we haven't. No. Sometimes we believe that we're the fury of God that goes out into the world, but we aren't. We aren't. We even seen James and John try to play that card. But we aren't. We could think ourselves grand, splendid, high and mighty. But we aren't. At the end of it all, there's going to be two people that stand before God. Sinners and forgiven. That's it. That's it. One's not better than the other either. One's just forgiven. One's not. That's it. I love seeing that whole region changed. I like that. And I like that it was done from someone untrained and someone unqualified, because it gives me the place to stand right here and say to you that no one can call you untrained and unqualified if you were once one person, met Jesus, and are now another person. You just show that to people and tell them why it happened. That's it. That's it. That testimony right there. That's it. Then I love seeing on the backside of all of that, after Jesus dissolved that great darkness, I love seeing the scribes and the Pharisees show up for that second round of assault on the region, filling up with pride and arrogance. Yeah. So let's just evaluate ourselves, see where we stand with those things. See if there's anything in us that's knocking us off of the point of humility. Let's pray.